All right. We are live. Well, good afternoon, Facebook, and good afternoon, social media. We are so happy that you took the time to join us today. We are asking as you check in today, this afternoon, but you'll take the time to share this on your Facebook page, share this on your whatever social media that you have as you join us this afternoon. We have a great conversation, the pain, the law, and the healing, which we want to look at how, especially what has happened in Texas, especially what has happened in Buffalo, looking at the historical events of shootings within this country. How does it affect our neighborhoods, our society, our communities? How does it affect immediate families? How does it affect us mentally, emotionally, and in every other way? And so, this afternoon, we have some great, outstanding panelists with us. We have Pastor Edward-Hinds, who is of the 67 Clergy Priest and God Squad. We also have award-winning Dr.Pervis Taylor with us, and we also have Dr. Craig Wright, who is an advocate, just an international advocate of speaking out against justice, and speaking against things that happens within the community. And so we're going to have a great conversation this afternoon. We need you to join us. Join us as we go into this conversation. It's going to be awesome. You're going to hear some things, you're going to hear some thoughts, and we need you to go into the comment section. Let us know that you're here. Call your politicians, call your elected officials, call your mother, your father, call your pastor, most of all, call anyone who is which I call the COI, the Centers of Influence within your neighborhoods, and tell them to log on so that we can have this great conversation. All right. So this afternoon, guys, we're going to start off about, let's just go around the table and introduce yourself and tell the people who you are. And then we're going to jump into how do you take what has happened in Texas? How has it affected you and your community? First person can go is Pastor Edward-Hinds.
And good afternoon, and thank you, Reverend Allen, for having me join this conversation. I think it is a necessary conversation that we need to have as faith leaders, as leaders of influence in our communities. It is needed even more now than before, and so I appreciate you calling us together to this time of dialogue. I'm Pastor Edward-Hinds. I'm the interim president for the 6th Precinct Clergy Council, the God Squad. It's an organization, a faith-based organization, over 100 clergy in East Flatbush, Brooklyn, that is doing the work to end gun violence, not just in Brooklyn, but across New York City and across the country as well.
Awesome. So, Pastor Hinds, just real quickly, well, let's go on to the next person. Dr. Pervis Taylor, please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Dr. Allen, for having me. It's an honor to be on the stage with all of you. This is a very, very imperative and urgent conversation that needs to be had. I am Dr. Pervis Taylor. I have over 10 years of experience in working with men, particularly Black men, around men's mental health, Black men's mental health. I'm the author of 2 books, Survival Mode and Heal Forward, books on Black men's mental health. I also have a master's in clinical psychology from Columbia University. I'm a mental health advocate, life coach, also co-founder of Alchemic Solutions. It's a program that's based here in New York City that teaches young men of color how to develop and cultivate emotional intelligence. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Whoosh.
My God.
I didn't have enough words to fill a paper right there. Jeez, that's wonderful. I love when Black men are as accomplished as these brothers right here. And these are the men that we have to celebrate in every single way, when men can rise up above the waves that happen within our societies. And the next, Reverend Dr. Craig Wright, would you please introduce yourself?
Grace and peace, everyone. Rev.Dr., my brother Dave Allen, and my new brothers who I've adopted, one who I will be borrowing glasses, Taylor and Dr. Edward Richard-Hinds. I thank you for arranging the space for us, because as our community needs to heal, we have to heal so that we're not leading and bleeding simultaneously. And so
Good.
thank you so much. I'm Reverend Craig Wright, Doctor of Ministry from New York Theological Seminary, finishing a Doctor of Education from Alverno College. I serve as the pastor of People's Institutional AME Church in Brooklyn, and I serve the northeastern region of the United States for the AME Church as the Director of Social Action, as well as active with a few other things. And I'm a college administrator as well, where I serve as the Chief Diversity Officer in one of the State University of New York schools. And so I'm happy to be here because there's work to be done. And oftentimes you forget that there's brothers and sisters. I don't want to negate the sisters, but there are brothers and sisters. They're heroes, sheroes, and their roles who are out there. Come on here, somebody. Because
Yes.
that's part of the problem. We are segregated. We're allowing people to dilute our strength by polluting our sheroes, heroes, and their roles. And so
Absolutely.
that's not happening on my watch. And so if you've got the heart to serve and the heart of loving people, then you're on the team. And so thank you, Dr. Dave Allen, for this venue.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So we're going to jump right into the middle of the pool. What I call the middle of the pool is the place where most people can't swim. So these are the conversations that we need to have. Pastor Hinds, let's talk about what has happened in Buffalo first, and then segue into what has happened in what is going on in Texas for us. And then Pastor Craig, if you could take it over secondly, and then you also, Dr. Pervis Taylor. Go
on. Thank you. So I had the opportunity over the weekend to go to Buffalo to see firsthand on the ground a call that we received with other organizations that are in what is called the crisis management system in New York, and it's almost surreal. I had the unfortunate task, and I say unfortunate because to see the video, and watching the video, but actually being at the actual spot at Tops, the word I can use is surreal. The community is hurting. Buffalo is hurting. Buffalo is in pain. At the time when I went, they had released the bodies to the families and were now commencing the funeral services. In fact, while I was there was one funeral service on the Monday, and all of this week they're having funeral services. Wow. It's a travesty which took place against our Black brothers and sisters, and not so much that, but it's so much that it's our elderly, it's our mothers, it's our grandmothers, our fathers, our grandfathers. I when I was at Tops, a man came and he bent down and he began to weep. He began to weep as he placed an angel wing over one of the names Hayward. And when he got up, I spoke to him and I asked him, his name is John, and he was at the prayer breakfast that Brother Hayward was. And he left to go home. Hayward left to go to the supermarket and the rest, So he was in so much pain, and his pain is but one of hundreds. There are organizations on the ground up there that are doing work to impact and change lives in the Black and brown communities up there and persons. However, there's so much that is needed in Buffalo. It's a food desert. It is a technological desert there, and so much needs to be done. And I know that, and that happened in Buffalo, it is not going to take a sprint for this to be over. It's going to be a marathon. It's going to take a long while. And so there's need for much resources at this time. and for the way forward. It really is a terrible act of what I call hate and sheer unadulterated evil that is permeating our society, characterized by young white supremacists who's able to take up a gun and to exact these kind of crime. But the overall picture is just evil. It's just evil that is present in the world, that is manifesting in ways, in astronomical ways that we really need to take a hold of.
Yeah, I agree with that. I heard this woman said on CNN, she says, I can't understand how is it these young men, and it's mostly young men, which we'll address with Dr. Taylor, mostly young men that are going around the country and doing these mass killings.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things we would like to address within this segment today is what's going on with our young people? What's really happening? Dr. Wright, would you like to take it up from there on what you see happening in Buffalo
Sure.
and also in Texas?
You know, there has been a growing sense of divisiveness, a spirit of divisiveness in our nation, and we probably can put our finger on when it was, but it came in and shot like a 45. And so, and with that, before I continue, let me just make this disclaimer that the opinions and thoughts that you might hear from me do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the First Episcopal District of the AME Church or People's Church or
Right.
any other affiliation that I might be affiliated with, from the Shriners to the Masons or the Sigmas or anyone else. It's just Craig. I'm just a nobody trying to tell somebody about, trying to tell everybody about someone who can save everybody. And so with that, in being a pastor in AME Church, I had the pleasure or the charge of being pastoring in that Western New York annual conference. And as a director of social action, Buffalo was one of my areas. And so there is a TOPS in Niagara Falls. There's one in Rochester there, but the one for that community. And if you could imagine how our churches are closely connected in territory, Bethel AME Church in Buffalo is 3 minutes away. Agape AME Church in Buffalo is 4.5 minutes away. Delane Waring is 3.5 minutes away. And then the church where my former youth minister, Berea Church of God in Christ, where Elder Superintendent Lee is about 7 minutes away. Those churches and those communities, those parents don't have a place to go, or they don't have a place to feel safe in going. And so even when the store opens back up, the trauma of where do I go and why am I safe, but also and you know, Dr. Taylor will talk to the psychology, but if you look at the sociology of what's happening when certain news cycles and certain news media and certain political leaders and even religious leaders, they get up and they do not condone and denounce this act of hate. You know, and they're instead they're using it as a bully pulpit or their ministry. They're talking about you know, what the French have talked about over 100 years ago with this so-called replacement theory, because someone said in 2010 that by 2045 America would be brown and that those who are in power would be minority. Well, the truth be told, they fudged the numbers anyway, because if you understand the fact that what they did prior to Reagan coming into, or not Reagan, but I forget the other person's name, coming into office, they allowed our Middle Eastern, North African folk to call themselves what? White. When they come into census, they're not menace. They used to be menace under Jimmy Carter and under Reagan and under Obama, but now they purposely wanted to become considered white. Why? Because they wanted to have the benefits of the political and social stature. It's not a race; it's a social status. And so when you look at that, and at the same time they're denouncing and fighting against from the academies and from the K-12s, they're fighting against nationwide in Florida and Georgia the inclusionary studies of critical race theory, which really talks about what happened in race. And that didn't come from America, it came from Germany, because the Germans said, you know what? We don't want to suffer this inhumanity that we've done to our Jewish brothers and sisters ever again. So they had to study it. It was done in South Africa. But we apparently don't want to change. Because I come from the cosmopolitan theologian William Watley wrote that book, said you got to face it to fix it, and talked about the cross. We're not trying to face it. So it's apparent that we don't want to fix it. So when we see these things repeating year after year after year, when we see legislation or the lack of movement or legislation to do background checks, just simple background checks.
Mm-hmm.
And to wait for people to buy a gun. When you see the cause, the constant, and while the people surrendered themselves, but how is it that you're going in and killing people, but you're walking away unscathed with some water and a Mickey D's? When I took this role as social action director, it was because of the Emmanuel 9.
Yes.
And we're still living it again. We can't heal because we can't heal. You can't heal in the same environment that's killing you. Huh? If your plant was dying because it was in the room and you called mama and them, or you called someone who knows how to work on plants and had a green thumb, they would say, "Oh baby, you need more water and you need more light." We're not trying to get water or light. We're trying to keep it in the dark, and so there's no healing. And I'll shut up so someone else can start. I'm sorry.
That is so phenomenal about we can't heal, or we're not even getting enough time to heal. Even when you get a cut on your hand or something, go for surgery, something like that, there is a process to healing, right? Mm-hmm. But now when these things happen, like I was watching CNN again, and when they were speaking to the mothers of Sandy Hook, the mothers were saying, I can't even talk because it's like we live in after 10 years, it's like the wound is fresh again. Mm-hmm. And one parent says, I couldn't go to sleep last night because just the very same exact scenario. I'm reliving. When I heard reliving the scenario, I was like, "Oh, come on, Dr.Pervis Taylor."
No, let me just say this before, if I can. I'm sorry, because I don't want anyone to think that my position is not of anything but pro humanity. I don't care what your perceived race is, your perceived orientation, pronouns are. I am pro 100% all humanity. I recently had a fire, and there's a picture in the fire news where a white young man who's a volunteer firefighter is walking out in tears, and he's holding two paintings that I have. One of the paintings is a depiction of an African Virgin Mary. The other painting is something that some of us have. It's a depiction of Africans of the Last Supper, where all the characters and he's in tears and he's holding them out because he sees the water coming out in the dining room and other places, and he's coming out and so and that's the humanity we need. The same type of humanity has people who will come to Harlem from Texas to serve as nurses during the height of the pandemic, no matter what their race are. That's the type of humanity we need, and we too often forget.
Right, absolutely. Well said. Dr.Pervis Taylor.
Yeah, I just think about both situations. I think what's challenging and what's going to be challenging going forward is, thinking about the healing process, because it's been already complicated, complex, and compiled, right? So it's like, to his point, how do we heal if we're in the environment that's killing us? And I think that's been the, like this ability to keep it moving, like that's going to wear out and people are going to crash, right? And so we really going to have to really start emphasizing and really finding ways and integrating more, unpacking more therapeutic approaches into our lives. We're going to just have to. Like, Families going to have to know, unfortunately, you're going to have to be trained in how to deal with grief, how to deal with tragedies, right? Like that's going to be something that's going to be integrated, that has to be integrated into our lives going forward, unfortunately, right? Unless, legislation changes. But I just think we're just coming out of a place where mental health numbers, mental illnesses in young people and people in general were already climbing up. And then the pandemic just exacerbated, right? And then we're in a space now where suicides are nationally they were down, but they were increased in African Americans, specifically Black men. So it's just like we were already headed towards a crisis, and I feel like things like this just only exacerbate it. Just seeing death around you, seeing no regard for life, and seeing it's just complex. You know what I mean? Like, and we have to talk about it. Like, like the kids dying, right? And the shooter died, right? That's crazy, right? And then on the other hand, these Black people in Buffalo, they died, but the shooter's still alive. Like that right there. And people, and I know people don't want to talk about that, but that is a thing. And that is affecting how we're looking at things, right? So it's like we can't fully heal the way we need to because there's inequities, so it's like even within the trauma, even within the disasters, there are inequities. And it's like that is just and that's a hard pill to swallow, and so like we're just trying to figure out ways as a collective, right? Because healing has to be, at this point, has to be collective. It has to be individual, but it also has to be collective.
Right. I like the fact that you address the inequities of what is happening systematically. Pastor Craig, Dr. Craig, how do you think that we should address these? Well, obviously, the refusal by politicians to head on address issues that affect first our local communities and then on a higher, from the Senate, Congress, all the way up.
We have to treat them as they are, and that is as a disease and an illness. They are functioning in a spirit of dis-ease because they are afraid of losing political power. And correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Taylor, but ill-ease and dis-ease is the precursor to disease. And the end result, when they are used as a bully pulpit or as a campaign spiel, the dis-ease, and that has always been the romanticize or the emotional attachment of getting people on your side, because they spew dis-ease, and 90% of stuff they don't believe themselves because they're not suffering those ills. They're congressmen, they're second generation, so they're putting it on the lower minds and the lower sets, like that 18-year-old who was 2 hours away from Buffalo, and they're exacerbating their dis-ease, and then they're playing on their disease. But then we get the disease because when you have dis-ease, watch this. When you have dis-ease, then your immunities cannot function. Your immunities will the World Health Organization and every heart association, lung association, arthritis foundation, kidney foundation, sickle cell anemia foundation, they tell you that 85% of diseases are exacerbated by what? Dis-ease, emotional trauma. So that's why 70% of the mortality rate of the coronavirus pandemic were us, because we're living in dis-ease. And so what has to happen is that we got to stop playing as if we need them. We need to say, if you're not going to do as we need, we're going to pardon some of our brothers and sisters. We're going to make sure that you're not arresting us, so that we can't get you in the police department, can't get you in those city and state jobs that require licenses, and that we can run you from the school board to the sewage board to the animal treatment. So because we know that dog catcher this year will be the state senator next year, and will be part of the electoral college the following year, and then run for state or U.S. government the following year. So you're going to stop trapping us, so that we can go ahead and run our own. If you don't want to work with us, If you don't want to have, if you don't want to make, and then when you look at this right now, beloved, we're dealing with some issues with our redistricting. They're trying to take away a congressional seat. They're trying to marginalize and blight certain communities. So there's no power. But there's a lot going on, and I hate to say it, but the bottom line is the byproduct of that dis-ease on certain parts is disease. That's why so many of our communities are polluted by wasteland landfills, or routes for trucks to come for diesel fuels, and bus stops. And so we have heart disease, lung disease. I'm asthmatical. The word is asthma, but I'm a doctor, so I can say I haven't outgrown it. Huh? But you got other people with all sorts of learning disabilities, and guess what? When you have those, and if you look at it, I think Dr. Taylor said more and more people are having ADHD, and more people are having they're on the spectrum, and maybe there's certain new terminologies, and our population is getting so docile, and so if you're not going to fix it, and you're leading us to the slaughter, then we will vote you out. That we all have to register to vote. And that means the day of the pastor saying, I can't serve two masters. Look at the word again. It says it's not serving a job and the church. It's serving your flesh.
The flesh, right?
And so I'm gonna shut up because
there's something Dr. Taylor mentioned that I want to bring to our attention, which speaks to the inequities even within these two crimes here, and that even as there is a reality of the Uvalde shooting, but it kind of underscore what happened in Buffalo, because the tendencies would want to call Buffalo a mass shooting, which it is. It is a mass shooting,
right? But
it is an act of hate against a particular race, and that cannot be under the mass shooting. It must be above, because it really is a deliberate, premeditated, pre-calculated act against a black race. And since the Sandy Hook shooting, elementary shooting, which is 10 years ago, there have been at least 900 shootings in our schools. Yeah. And so what does that say to us? And yet still the gun laws have not changed much in this country. That would have a young man, an 18-year-old, being able to purchase 2 AR-15 guns and be able to do this damage. And even to the point that Dr. Wright mentioned, I echo that, because we tend to have the expectation, what I call the top-down expectation.
My God.
That we expect legislators who are up top to do whatever to impact us. But the power lies in the people.
Power lies.
So I reverse that and say we have to take a bottom-up approach, that the parents, the students, the community, the families, that we are the ones who have the power. And that comes through our ability to take a pencil or a pen and to make a scratcher and get to that name that we assign to lead us, that will help to take us and to bring our concerns and our issues to reality and to a point of solution. The power lies in us, and we are the ones who have to exact that change.
May I say something?
Absolutely. Go on. This is on fire right now.
Something Pastor Hinds said, and I know that you're going to ask the question around, is this mental health or is this something else? It's definitely something else, because if you have the time to write a manifesto,
my God, that's it.
That means you have time to process and right from wrong.
Yes.
So that's not mental health. And so what I don't like and what I find offensive is that can be used as an excuse, as opposed to absolve one from responsibility.
Right.
And so that's the thing that I think is very that angers me about the situation, is like, in the conversation they were like, oh, his brain, his frontal lobe is not fully developed, but right from wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And he purposely, even when he was doing it, he said to the white person, oh no, not you.
I'm sorry.
Right. I'm sorry.
He
had presence of mind.
Wait, this is Buffalo?
Yeah.
He said, I'm sorry.
He's recording.
I'm sorry.
Yep. He said, I'm sorry, not you. Right.
Not you. So it's like, in that situation, like anytime a person has time to process and think something out methodically, that means that they are of sound mind. And so we can't use mental health as a scapegoat in these situations. We need to acknowledge that the demonic exists.
Yes, that's correct.
That's
Evil.
And to what Dr. Wright said, Hitler didn't kill anybody. It was his rhetoric.
That's it.
Mhm.
That's it.
That killed people.
That's
It's
right.
the people, he said, the lower minds, right? So the danger of this all is the rhetoric.
Wow.
You get what I'm saying? Like, that's the danger part. So then going back to Texas, right? That situation, that young man even processed because he messaged someone and told them what he was going to do. He wrote down some things. So he bought the body armor. So he had time to process. He had enough time to say, this is not a good idea. So we need to acknowledge that evil exists.
Wow.
This is not about mental health. It's about mental health for all of us.
Right. But
But
it's
for them,
Yep.
no, that's purely demonic.
The root is that's the root. It is evil.
Right.
That is the
It's
root.
evil.
And that's why we have to we for us to have a solution, we have to go to the root of the problem.
Absolutely.
What is the ultimate root? Because if we take from the branches and we clip off the branches, then it will spring forth again. But it's when we address the root causes of this that we're able to pull up and to dismantle and to prevent what happened last week and this week to happen again.
Right.
Yeah.
Pastor Hinds, you've been in the God Squad for a number of years. When you see these crimes happening in the Black community, especially, how do you see the impact on mothers and fathers and families? What do you see? Tell us what you see.
It is a pain that when the lights go off, when the news media leave in their vehicles, when the funeral is over, when families return back to their countries or places of origin, that this mother, this father, these siblings, who we tend not to talk about, siblings, have to go back into a context where their loved one is no more. And that for them lasts forever. It is a palpable pain. And as we work with we have about almost 60 mothers in our Mothers for Support group called Mothers for Safe Cities, where we help these mothers and fathers and siblings who are dealing with this trauma every day. Thanksgiving holidays are no longer the same. Their backpacks become irrelevant. They are not there. Their beds are empty. And these mothers and fathers and siblings, it is a pain that we have to be helping them to walk them through this pain. So even though we may not have the direct impact as they would, but we do connect them to resources that can help them deal with their own mental health and their own stability, and for those who are ready to turn their pain into purpose by establishing, and we have many who have established their own 501c3 organizations in memory of their loved ones doing work in the community. But it is perpetual trauma for them.
Yeah, it's complicated because of violent death. The grief with that is a lot different than an illness death.
Correct.
Right.
Because violent death can almost be preventable. It's that constant that negotiating. If that they get stuck in that space of the grief process of negotiating, like, well, if I would have done this, maybe if I just would have told them not to do this, maybe you know what I'm saying? So that cycle for them to land at the place of acceptance, which is like the end of your suffering, so to speak, around grief, it's hard.
It is difficult
in a violent world.
It is difficult, and news like what happened in Buffalo, and it re-traumatizes them.
Re-traumatizes,
right. And so for us as clergy, it's a daily, not daily, but it's a perpetual walk with them. We journey with them. We stay in touch with them. We We connect with them every month. They do have their mothers, their peer support group. They do have their healing circles that we do provide the Mother's Day and these events. We do support them even more on these occasions to let them, to say to them that we remember.
Yeah.
Because that's oftentimes they feel forgotten, but we remember.
Yeah.
And as we remember, we provide for them a space they deal with their hurt and to bring the healing that they need.
Dr. I think that's probably part of the reason why we have the degree of apathy in these younger generations. And I say that because you're talking about trauma, and with certain trauma, and what we're looking at, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Taylor, is systemic trauma, systematic trauma. And with that, with trauma, it's fight, flight, or freeze. But after you fight, after you freeze, or appease. Right. But after you have tried to fight, and after you have tried to run, flight, and after you try to appease, we freeze, and therefore we stop voting. We hear the rhetoric: why bother voting? Why bother do this? We can't do anything change. And so, as a church community, as a community of believers, we got to get our young people and some of our old people who have given up and say, you know what? Let's do this. Let's do something small. Let's send something to Buffalo. Let's send something to Texas. Let's do something so that we can show them that you can have an impact in this little thing, and that your trauma doesn't have to be compartmentalized in your mental and then played out as we're walking around with PTSD. And I don't mean post-traumatic stress. I mean present traumatic stress syndrome.
Present.
And so let's register everybody to vote. Let's have voting parties. Let's have voting prayer parties, and praise parties. Come on. Let's work on somebody's campaign, and let's get somebody in and let them make sure they talk to us, and they're going to talk the talk and walk the walk that we want them to walk.
Right. Dr. Craig, you touched on something I was going to ask you. In light of what our Attorney General said this morning in Twitter text, referencing that this is the only country where this consistently happens. How do you, in light of what you just said, how do we begin to change the narrative amongst our young people? Because, in our communities, we like to say all politicians are liars. We like to say things like, I'm not going to vote because they're all going to do the same thing. How do we begin to change the narrative and the old perspective that they're all going to do the same thing? They're all just going to leave us and forget about the promises that they made while they were campaigning. How do we begin to change the narrative and create this new meta narrative to say, okay, the people that we're going to put in power, and from what Pastor Hinds says, from bottom up, right? How do we now say, all right, from now on, this is the image of what we're looking for, right? This is the template. And we say to these young people, we campaign amongst them and say, we want you to be a part of this. We want you to own it. How do we begin to change that narrative amongst the leaders of the communities, like the pastors and all these other people?
One thing we have to do is that we can't just talk about it no more, because this generation, they are multitasking, and they don't have the bandwidth to hear our stuff anymore. They want to see it. They want to see it, hear it, smell it, and feel it simultaneously. That's our accountability. In order to earn their credibility with them, they have to see it. So that means we gotta, when for example, in the local church, if grandchildren are not going to church with grandma, grandpa, with mom and dad, why? Because they hear what mom and dad are saying about the pastor or other church members in the church. Likewise, if you're hearing about that in the barbershop, if you're hearing about that in the home, instead of saying, well, you know what? Here's a teachable moment. Let's have a conversation with someone. Let's meet. I've had several conversations with certain elected officials in the city and throughout the state, and we understand. We understand as adults, and we understand that if we can't back them, And it's not just backing them by votes, because that's just a part of it. We're the only people that came out of slavery without treasures. If you remember when they came out of Egypt, they came out with gold and silver and purple and everything else, huh? And so because money has power. I'm not the love of money, but money has power, and so we have to galvanize our fiscal support so that we can say, no, I will back you, so you don't have to sell us out. I will back you. And we have to teach them that accountability and let them understand that this is what they want to do. Mm-hmm. But unless we have all of our car dealerships and our churches can develop a like Richard Allen, a free African society, which is our PAC, Political Action Committee, and we can support our own. And I say our own, like Thurgood Marshall said when he was asked by Roger Grimsby, who should replace you, a black man or a white man? And he said, a black snake will bite you just like a white snake. I don't care your color, I care your heart.
Yeah.
And so we got to show them that there's some people who will work with us, but we got to work with them.
Right. How important is the primaries right now? Let the people know. A few more minutes to get off. How important are the primaries right now?
If we don't get in this now and get the right people to run for the Congress, for a Senate, for Assembly, for state Senate, for state Assembly, for council persons, for we have a few congressional seats out here on Long Island. We have to be in it right now, because there's a desire to follow the rhetoric. And there's a desire, unfortunately, it's just like in the TV westerns. The bad guy always has, we're always outgunned and always outpersoned with the bad guy. But there's going to come a hero, and the sky is going to crack open. Before that, he's going to send the word. So we have to come together, and vote that right person, and it continues. We can't get tired. Right. The foundation, I think it was Jefferson who said eternal vigilance is the price we must pay for freedom. He wasn't a Bible scholar, but he read somewhere, even though he wasn't faithful, but he read somewhere that means watch as well as pray. Yeah, we can't stop.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say just one thing, the generation like beneath me, the younger people to this point, action that they want to see doing. You have to keep in mind their bandwidth and their capacity is for thriving and flourishing. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. My generation and up was on just getting by, right? So they're more in the aspect. So there's conflict, right? So we have to change our mindsets. We have to shift our mindsets to flourishing, to results oriented, right? As opposed to what we've done in the past, which has been amazing, right? I'm definitely not minimizing anything. But what I'm saying is we have to shift how we approach things, because they are all about results.
Right. Pastor Hinds, how can we equip our communities to face the onslaught that we've been facing when it comes to gun violence? And how do we equip, especially younger people, the older ones, as we see, especially now that summer is coming up, as you know, crimes rise during the summer times, right? That's where a lot of families experience the pain.
Right.
So how do we equip our churches, our communities, our young people as they go throughout the summertime?
Well, we have to what we call in our organization, pray with our feet. So there is time for prayer. And we can underscore the power of prayer. After we have prayed and we said amen, we need to get up and do something. And it's a get up and walk. And as faith leaders, what I also term we put legs to our faith. Yeah. And because faith without works, is dead, it's dormant. And so we have to be out there. We have to be engaging in the community. We have to engage more young people. We have to find out what are the resources that they need. What do the young people need? They need jobs. They need a sense of self, a sense of belonging. A lot of them are coming from single parent homes. There's absenteeism of one parent, father in the home, which is a whole different conversation which we can have. But it's about giving these young people a sense of purpose, sense of belonging, and for them to have a better understanding of who they are, right, as people of color, but people on a whole. And for the churches, for our churches to what I take a quote from one of our pastors in a God Squad. He says, and it's not my quote, it's his. He says, we need to leave our trenches, leave our benches, and get out there in the trenches.
My God.
Come off our steeple and get down to the people. It's about, and COVID really has opened the reality for us that while our church doors were forced to be closed, that the church was not closed, because the church is not the building. COVID was a reminder for us, that the church is the people, and we are the ecclesia, and we, the ecclesia, have to go out and to interact with our communities. We do give them jobs. They need jobs, we resources that they need. We provide those resources for them. We connect them to resources. And one thing I want to say that which is missing from this generation, which was great in our generation, which I call the village concept. It took a village to raise children, and we have to kind of infuse that back inside to because we want to reinforce the brother's keeper. We do not live in isolation. COVID brought isolation. COVID brought them to be in a context with their confined their homes and the PS4 and the games and the cell phones, the Snapchat, the Instagram, everything. But there is need for human interaction.
My God.
These are the things that street engagement do. It's a big part. It's a big part. We know that this generation Z and the Alpha, that technology is in the same category as air and water. But we cannot deny the fact that
my God.
Interaction, human interaction.
Yeah.
It's so important. And so as leaders, as pastors, as community, we need to be out there in the streets and to give them a sense of purpose and hope, and that there is something else better to life than the trajectory that they are going down on.
Amen.
Absolutely. I just want to add on just one thing to the tail end of what he was saying. Like, it was so spot on, because the danger is what we're doing, the isolation, and what COVID did was isolate a lot of kids and really push them into a place of like lacking empathy. If you don't have empathy, then it's a wrap. That's sociopathy, right? That's how we raise. That's why we're in a generation of narcissism, where there's no empathy. So if you don't have empathy, then you can't have compassion, which is empathy in action.
Yeah.
My God.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So we have to cultivate community and interaction amongst our young people. It has to be just as important as technology is.
Correct.
Because if not,
Absolutely,
we're just going to be raising a generation of narcissists.
Correct.
And I think what both of you said, and I'm a lay country boy, so I'll say it this way: we got to love on our folk.
Yeah.
They have to trust us to know that we love them. No matter what color they're wearing, no matter how they're wearing their pants or whatever they're wearing, no matter how they talk, we got to show them some love. That type of love that they can trust us and call upon us.
Yeah.
That's
good.
Pastor Hinds, I know you got to run in a minute, and we're about to finish, but I want to give what last words you have to say before we close out today. And this has been so phenomenal. What do you have to say to the people before we sign off? And before I forget, Dr.Pervis, if you can talk about, after he leaves, say his words, I want you to just speak briefly about the critical importance of emotional intelligence within our organization, within schools, within churches. How important is that? So Pastor Hinds, just give the last words. I know you got to run to another meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We were the God Squad. We were at a march last week, Saturday, 2 Saturdays ago, with marching with the Asian Americans. Because 2021 there was an uptick in Asian crimes, and we sought to partner with them, and we are marching with them, denouncing hate. And while we were marching with them, unbeknownst to us, while we were marching in Soho and Chinatown, that this act took place in Buffalo at the same time. We were promulgating a message of love over hate. And I want to encourage those who are listening and watching, those who are doing the work, those who are engaging, those who are on the ground, that the Bible says we should not be weary in well-doing. And it can become overbearing.
Yeah.
It can become too much. When it becomes too much. And as we check on our own mental health, but let us not back down. Let us not grow tired in doing the work, because while there is evil present and we know the root is evil, we know that good will always triumph over evil. Amen. And if we hold that and we embrace that and we apply the good in various areas, whatever context we serve in, that we infuse that good, when we infuse and inject that good and give a double dose. COVID takes 2 doses. A double dose on the good. Good will always triumph over evil. And that is the hope that we have. Awesome. That's the hope that we keep in the back of our minds, that is helping to push us to continue to do the work. And so I want to encourage all of us that we continue to build on the hope that we have. And while we tap into the various areas that we need to do the work and have the work done, that we have this in the background of our minds, hope that things will get better. Amen. I believe so. I believe there can be an end to gun violence, and I will not stop believing that until it happens. And I will call
my God. Amen.
That is awesome. Pastor Hans, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you got another meeting. He's the always busy man, but he always takes the time for us to talk about these great and important topics. Ladies and gentlemen, give your comments for Pastor Edward-Hinds, interim president of the
Praise the Lord. Amen.
God Squad. Thank you so much.
Bless you.
God bless you. All right. Thank you. Pastor, I'm about to anoint you as Pastor, Dr. Taylor.
Yes.
Let's talk about emotional intelligence.
Yes.
And the critical importance of it. We got a few more minutes. The critical importance of it, especially in our churches and in our local places of work, and also within our school system. How critical is that right now?
It's essential. The strength of any relationship is in its ability to be repaired, right? And you have to think your most vital relationship that you have on earth outside of marriage and things like that is with yourself. So you have to know how to repair yourself. And part of, which is a tenet of emotional intelligence, self-regulation, self-management, but it begins with self-awareness. You have to be able to know what it is that you're feeling, what you're experiencing. You have to be able to identify it, name it, and be able to regulate it, right? So we have to know how to process the emotions that we're experiencing, right? Before we engage into social awareness and relationship management, which is the ultimate end game of emotional intelligence, is managing relationships successfully. We have to be able to spend time with ourselves, and it seems like we don't have enough time to spend time with ourselves. We have to be introspective, which is what I talk about all the time, is taking a deep dive into yourself and really understanding who you are, understanding how you feeling about certain things. How am I really feeling about this Buffalo, Texas thing? Right? Because the natural thing is to keep it moving. Right?
My God.
And so emotional intelligence is necessary right now. It is not an option. It is a must, because we have to be able to process what we're dealing with, to be available for other people, to even be available for our students, right? We have to really deal with ourselves in an authentic way, not in a suppressive way, but in a real authentic way. And so emotional intelligence it's needed and it's necessary, but it begins with you knowing yourself and knowing how to regulate yourself.
Man, that was so powerful. I mean, Pastor Craig, I was looking for a note to write that quickly to put in a sermon I'm going to preach.
I got it too. So we're gonna both send him a love.
I'm like, oh my gosh. Dr. Taylor, just one last thing. Could you tell? I heard you said something about moving on. What is the difference? And I know we didn't discuss this, but what is the difference between moving on and moving forward?
Yeah, moving forward. And my book is called Heal Forward.
Right.
Moving forward is making choices towards where you want to go.
Okay.
Moving on is business as usual.
Jeez. Oh my gosh. Y'all heard that, people? Put that in the comment section.
Say that one more time, Doc.
Say that one more time, brother. Like, ladies and gentlemen, you got to hear these gems that these men, these brothers have just dropped today. I mean, I'm talking about the best of the best who's here right now. You got to say that again for the people.
No, moving forward is making choices towards where you want to go. And moving on is business as usual.
My God.
Wow.
That's powerful.
Do you think that I would, I don't really want to jump on the churches, but do you think politicians and churches, when after a few months, a few weeks of just
it'll be business as usual
settling, it's back to business as usual?
It's business as usual, and that's because to move forward, to heal forward, requires work, and that's hurtful, that's painful, that's undoing, that's unlearning, that is changing your mindset, that is confronting some things. It's a lot of work,
right?
But that's the beautiful thing. On the other side of it is thriving and flourishing.
Mm-hmm. Got it. What is your book Heal Forward is about? Tell us about
Heal
it.
Forward it's a book that I wrote for Black men's mental health, to get Black men on the journey towards wholeness and flourishing, not just in money and what we produce, but in who we are as men, as beings.
And how can people get in touch with you and these books?
I'll tell you how, because I'm going to have him come speak on one of our Zoom sessions for the men of people and the men of Brooklyn, Westchester, so we can share that book.
That is awesome. I was
also
looking
have to come out to the college when we deal with the faculty. I do a program for the faculty and staff. Just unpack this, where we can come in before we bleed all over our students. We can just talk and deal with ourselves, so that we can. Brother Warren Graham provided some workshops last year, and you want to make sure you change it around. But we're going to be in touch. Dr. Allen, please send me his number right after you hang up.
I will.
All right.
And
if I may,
go on.
Because Dr. Hinds did mention, and Dr. Taylor also spiritual. And when you look at the political terrain and you look at the commonality that each sides of the aisle have, and other people, there's someone who's in a book called Diversity, and it talks about everyone's right, and everyone is right, but consider the different opinions so that you can get to righteousness. But I'm reminded of Genesis 37. We're and in Genesis 37 it talks about Joseph exposing his dreams, sharing his dreams with his brothers, but it also talks about his brothers and his father interpreting the dreams. And the thought is that oftentimes we have the same gift but different anointing. And so Joseph wasn't caught up in the physical of looking at his ability through the flesh as his brothers were. That's where the dis-ease comes from. And with the dis-ease, trying to handle it on yourself, by yourself, in isolation, and it's all up to you, you have the dis-ease, which causes the dis-ease, which resulted in the hate and the attempted murder, and then this ultimate decision to sell his brother into slavery. Disease, but God was with him, and God is with us. And so what we have to understand, that it is a spiritual warfare that we're dealing with, all this dis-ease. And so we have to be prayed up, and we have to encourage our younger generation to stay in the hands of the Lord, to seek the Lord. We have to represent Christ to them. We have to represent the word of God to them, and so that they can see that God is not discriminating against wherever you're coming from, whatever you're doing, whatever you love to do. God just wants to love on you, wants to heal you, and wants to restore you, and God can, no matter what, no matter who said what or what's been done to you, because we're dealing with some real disease in this nation, and it's spiritual warfare. But lastly, if back to your question earlier about what do we tell our youngsters about getting involved politically, find a candidate's name. I'm asking everyone just to do a quick homework assignment. Find a political person's name, Google them, go to the state or city council page, and you will see a record of what they voted on. Don't trust me, because you're not. Trust your reading. Don't just take a Google class or Instagram class. Look at it yourself. The record's there. And then you decide and vote on that person. Thank you again, brother.
No, just the last comments here. I like what you said, Pastor Craig, about the story of Joseph, or something just flashed across my head. Joseph had this dream, right? And Joseph also was just telling his brothers the dream. And most times when we tell people our dream,
My God,
begin to add some negative things to it. Mm-hmm. And most times we're telling the politicians the dreams of the neighborhoods that we want. We're telling the people what we're looking forward to. We're telling the people what God has put inside of us. And what has happened is that we get there.